welcome back for another episode of New England Road Talk. I'm Conrad Leger from Environmental Partners, and I'm joined again by art.baker of Indus and Bobby Betsold of All States Material Group. Guys, really good, informative episode in terms of education. We had Mike Allen and Sinan Yordem from 3M, and they talked about a number of different topics, autonomous vehicles, the new MUTCD requirements, which as we got into it, we realized that it's so early in the process there that we're probably going to have them back on for another episode when that information gets more finalized and the municipalities have a better idea of what to do. But I thought it was really interesting, especially from an asset management standpoint, knowing how these municipalities are going to have to handle these pavement markings and signs moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Conrad. And this whole autonomous vehicle subject is just a fascinating one to me. And the more and more I learn about it, just to be able to picture someday, there's going to be vehicles with, you don't have to control it. It controls itself. There's going to be, I think a lot of pressure at some point on the towns and the states to, upgrade their pavement markings and signs. But I think in the end, it's going to be a real good thing from a safety point of view. In this episode, they clarify a bunch of good things for you municipal folks on the MUTCD and some other stuff. So a great episode. And I think it's going to be very educational for everybody.
It is cool to hear. And, we kind of get tied up in the day-to-day things sometimes with pavement markings, with signage and that, and kind of take for granted what they are. But yeah, the advancements, the technology, and all the different things that are involved in them and depend on them in terms of future advancements is really cool. So, it certainly was eye-opening on some of the topics for me, and I think for our viewers will be really good for information going forward.
Absolutely. All right. Well, without further ado, here's our conversation with Mike Allen and Sinan Yordem of 3M.
And everybody have a happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, and just don't crack your road like this.
All right, Mike and Sinan, thanks for joining us today. Just wanted to get right into it, and why don't you guys give me an overview of what you guys do for 3M and what you're into over there?
Yeah, my name's Mike Allen. I cover New England for 3M Traffic Safety Division, and I basically call on the local agencies, the state agencies. I work with all the fabricators that make the signs and the pavement. Sinan?
It's great to be here, Conrad, today. So my name is Sinan Yordem. I'm with 3M's Transportation Safety Division. I'm a global segment marketing manager responsible for our urban safety and mobility segment, as well as some of our partnerships on the analytics front.
Awesome. Today's episode is really timely. I know, Mike, you and I have had a lot of discussions about MUTCD requirements in the past, and what the municipalities have to deal with in meeting those requirements. So I know recently FHWA put out a call for information in terms of the new MUTCD that's going to be coming out. It's a pretty significant update from, I believe, what was 2009. Could you give us a little bit of info about what the new MUTCD will be and what the new requirements are that they're looking at for municipalities?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously 2009 was the last time that the MUTCD was updated. At this point, we have a document out that's about 300 pages from Federal Highway that's was recently extended for agencies to review until May 14th. So all of your state agencies and some of the locals are looking at and dividing out each of the components of that document. And what they're looking at is pavement markings, they're looking at signing, they're looking at temporary traffic control, looking at all these different features that ultimately define what some of what we're doing on the roads.
Awesome. And I know retroreflectivity was a big component of the last MUTCD, especially from the asset management side of things. I know a lot of the municipalities out there had to put together a sign management program to kind of track retroreflectivity. And so is there anything in the new requirements that is in regard to retroreflectivity?
Yeah, there is. We haven't had a chance to review everything as of yet. What we have seen in the past, most of our comments in around sign management and asset management is around maintaining traffic sign retroreflectivity. So that was updated and revised in 2013, and it basically suggested that agencies should have until June 14th, 2014 to implement and continue to use an assessment or management method to look at the regulatory and warning signs.
Right, and I know in the initial requirement, there was a timeline for replacement of a lot of those signs, and that's since been relaxed and is no longer in place. Are there any other specific requirements that the cities and towns should be knowing about in the new MUTCD that's coming out?
As far as new standards, we haven't been able to review all of them as of yet. The ones that we're seeing that are most recent from the last MUTCD were, we see a lot of towns and cities replacing their chevrons, their warning signs, to indicate correct curvature, correct placement. We've seen recently a lot of agencies putting out contracts to address their rail grade crossbucks and rail intersection related areas. And then we've seen a lot of the one ways, a lot of this focus to address kind of the interchanges and intersections that a lot of the upgrades have come from in the past.
Gotcha. And I know there's a requirement or there's a look right now at changing 4-inch to 6-inch lines on roads of over a speed of 45 miles per hour, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So obviously pavement markings and signing, kind of two separate things, but yeah, with pavement markings, there's a ton of changes and recommendations that are being built primarily because of the machine vision, right? So machine vision is the autonomous vehicle. How does that vehicle see all the assets on the roads? How does it see lines? How does it see signs? And a lot of the markings and products that are out there now are being used, being marketed so that we can see them, and redundantly, the machine can see them better. So I'll let Sinan talk maybe a little bit more about the signing piece from an autonomous vehicle standpoint. But with the pavement markings, to address your question, yeah, the recommendation for locals to go from 4-inch to 6-inch is a big one. And that's for roads that are higher than 45 miles an hour. And basically the recommendation has been already implemented in states like Rhode Island, where they have, a smaller infrastructure where they can manage this, all the local roads, all these roads on a smaller level than say in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, Maine, or Vermont. And they've seen reduction in crashes because of that increase in width of the pavement markings.
Gotcha.
Along those lines, Mike, staying with the long lines and the center lines, I typically you see double yellow center lines most of the time, but I do still see from time to time a single yellow line on a road. Can you talk a little bit about what the MUTCD allows, and is a single line allowed anymore? And if it isn't, is there any kind of exemptions, with that might allow a single yellow line?
True. Yeah. So Art, that's a big one. When we teach our Baystate roads course, and we have one coming up on striping on March the 2nd. So if you're interested, check that out. But we really focus and remind all these agencies, because you will see agencies, that do have single center lines, and that is not allowed in the MUTCD. It's allowed on table 3D-1 for placement of that single yellow line as a buffer, as a barrier separation, but it's not allowed down the middle of the road. So in all those cases where there are single yellow lines on those roads, those need to be turned over to double yellow. And that could be done either through scarification and scarring the road to put a double yellow right down the middle of the line if it's right in the middle, or you could paint right over it and get it as close to as possible.
Do you see, there's a lot of these thinner, narrower roads, Mike, where they still want some sort of safety for, those foggy evenings. Have you seen roads where they don't do the center line and just do the white edge lines? because the problem on the thin, narrow roads is if they do a double, people are driving on the double yellow line all the time for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having the edge line is very important. The double yellow in the middle is important as well. The machines are looking for lines. The machine vision, you could have a brand new road, hot top looks perfect, but people are going to, one, they're going to want to speed. And two, the machine vision, the cameras on the machines right now that are similar to the cameras that are in our cell phones are going to be looking for lines. And if it sees that edge line or sees a center line, it's going to better keep you in your lane. So the lane departure features of the vehicle are going to keep you where you need to be. And if it's an edge line, obviously the six inches are more visible than a 4-inch. And over a period of time, as we know, markings degrade. The reflectivity starts wearing away, the durability starts wearing away. And if a machine loses that edge line, it has a chance of, obviously, if someone's not paying attention when they're driving, of driving off the road because the machine doesn't see it.
And that's a perfect lead into my next question is that, the durability, the reflectivity on the different materials of these pavement markings, the epoxy versus the waterborne versus the thermoplastic. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So the different types of products are available through all the pavement marking installers. And we have about 5, 6 of these big installers in New England. And they use anywhere from paint all the way up to durable tape. So for the most part, paint is used primarily for temporary on interstate at a state level. And then you move your way up the continuum to more durable and thermoplastic, which is a thicker materials. And then you go into your polyurea epoxy, plural component material, and then you go to your durable tapes. So there's a different recommendation and temperature and application for each one of these things. There's not one good product that works for everyone, and that's what we talk about in the Baystate Roads class. But at the end of the day, the agency has to look at what are they trying to achieve? Are they looking for line presence? Do they want to repaint their roads year over year or multiple times a year? If so, they're using a paint. If they're looking for good intersection markings that hold up well with a lot of shear, potentially thermoplastic is a good application. If they're looking for visibility and wet reflectivity, dry reflectivity, if they're looking for something that dries fast, regardless of the temperature, especially when a lot of these resurfacing jobs get done late in the season, they're looking for a polyurea, which dries, in about 30 seconds. And then if they want a durable product that's going to provide high levels of preformed wet and dry reflectivity that's warranted, they want a tape. So they kind of have a choice in what they want to use their art. Really, it comes down to budget and what their priorities are.
Great.
It might, I do want to go a little bit further on the striping and tie into some treatments, but I guess first, we're talking about the single yellow line is kind of a hot topic. And Art and I are out here in the country a little bit. Are there any other kind of, hot topic or things that you see out there that are residual or things that are happening? People are using that, they kind of are looking past MUTCD or should be, cognizant of. Are there any kind of those things that jump off the page for you saying, this is being used a lot, but it really shouldn't be?
From an MUTCD standpoint, I can't think of, the single yellow is obviously something you see on a lot of rural roads. Some of the rural roads have used, the 2-lane rural roads have used rumble strips, but they're highly effective at lane departures. And now a lot of agencies are putting a mumble, which is a sinusoidal rumble, which is, it's a continuous sinusoidal groove under the surface, especially for double yellow down the middle of the road. And they're able to put that double yellow right into that groove to protect it from the snowplows. So they can make that wet reflective or dry reflective. I know that's not answering your question, but that's something I see for secondary.
Maybe so one of the things I see is a lot of different size stop signs, and some stop signs have stop bars and others don't have stop bars. Is there,
Sure.
there's a regulation for that as well?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Essentially, with every marking, there should be a sign, right, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, a lot of it is, and it's, I think a lot of times is at no fault to anybody. It's just kind of one of those things of, we talk a lot about with pavement treatments and that of, this is the way they've always done it. And not always necessarily just kind of replacing what's there, especially, in communities where, they may be restriping once a year and they just go out and wherever the stripes were, they put them back over top and off we go and all is good. So just didn't know if there were any of those kind of things that you were seeing that are kind of been updated that haven't necessarily been adapted or adopted, I guess, shall we say. But getting back to the striping though, obviously we've talked a lot here about different treatments. We talk a lot about pavement preservation and, and things with fog seals and chip seals and microsurfacing and, and kind of on and on. And wonder your thoughts as far as different types of striping and how they interact with the different types of treatments and any recommendations in that regard.
Yeah, great question. And like we had talked before, there's new innovations coming out constantly on the pavement management and the pavement the asphalts that are onto our market, right? So when we look at our history, we look at open graded friction course on interstate roads in Massachusetts, right? There was a directive back in the day that said no thermoplastic on the open graded friction course because it was being applied at 125 mils thick, and it was getting hit, and the skips and the edge lines were getting ripped off the road. So I think we've learned a lot, but at the same time, you have new technologies like microsurfacing and chip seals that have a lot of liquid asphalt with that crushed layer on top of stone. And it comes down to, are you surface applying it or are you recessing it, right? So on interstate jobs, everything is recessed, meaning it's ground out about 100 mils to put a liquid into that application. Whereas with a lot of the locals, it's surface applied. So when a marking is surface applied, depending on the size of that stone, will dictate whether you should use an 18 mil polyurea or paint compared to, say, a 15 mil paint that's going to dry at about 12 mils, and it's going to leave a lot of space in between the stones, so it's not going to adequately cover it. So I think the questions the locals should ask is really how thick material how thick the stone is, right? And if it's a dense mix, like a gap graded mix, potentially they can put closer to a 15 mil, right, application. Whereas when we get to some of the ultra thin bonded wearing courses on the interstates, we're going up to 30 mils because the stone is so large that we want to cover the voids to help make sure that the lines are visible. Excellent.
And I guess one follow on that, and you mentioned a little bit in terms of a lot of the work being done in the fall. And I think the question I get asked a lot of times, and I bet Art and Conrad, you get the same thing, is when you do get into that October, November, and now you need to stripe a road. What are the best course of action in terms of saying, does a community go and put a temporary out there to carry them through winter? Do they wait and do the permanent in the spring? What's kind of the best guidance on that as far as how to handle that type of finished striping on a project that may be late in the year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was talking to MassDOT, one of the construction engineers, about having a hard date as a cutoff. And in theory it works, but that temperature range changes every year, right? So the things that we look for in the pavement marking world, right? We look at how late we can go with a durable liquid like a polyurea, something that can go down at 30 degrees or sub 30 and still dry instantaneously. Whereas epoxy paint, thermoplastic, they don't handle the cold temperatures as well, right? So the things to look for in there are, has the road been salted? Is there brine on there? Has there been prolonged rainfall? And if it has rained a lot in the fall, we see the road sweating in the mornings, right? And it's not dry. If it's not going to be dry, there's no super marking that will go down when it's wet. Not that I know of. And ultimately, the dew and the frost are the enemy. So how can agencies, prevent against that? I think, Bobby, like you said, I think they put down a temporary marking. If it's that late in the season, put down a temporary marking, look for that good window, either go and put down, a polyurea or a temporary paint and get through the winter, and then come back and put that marking down in ideal conditions. Contact the manufacturer like 3M, contact the installer, the pavement marking installer, and ask them, based on the product that they're using, what is the ideal temperature for installation.
Excellent.
It's a good point too, because I feel like everybody's always jamming at the end of the season to get all their paving finished and complete before the winter, and everybody forgets about striping the road afterwards. They always forget that there's ideal temperatures to put those down at, and nobody wants to go through the winter time with no stripes on the road either. So it's a catch-22.
Conrad, let me just point out before you move on, for all our pavement manager viewers, is preparation of these pavement markings before you take on some of these surface treatments. In some cases, they do have to be ground down or removed. So just something to keep in mind to consider for successful pavement preservation projects. Absolutely.
Mike, you talked a little bit about autonomous vehicles and the industry kind of gearing up for that inevitability of them kind of being found a lot on our roads. So why don't you talk a little bit about what the industry is doing to kind of prepare for that, and what maybe municipalities, especially on their level, should be considering when they're installing pavement markings or signs?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll take the pavement markings one first, and then I'll pass it on to Sinan. Really, from a pavement marking standpoint, which is kind of where we're at with the vehicles that are on the road right now, like I said, the cameras that are on the cars are similar to the cameras in our cell phones, and they're looking for the lines. And there are really three components of that they're looking for. They're looking for the contrast, the white or the yellow against that black asphalt or backdrop. And that gets a lot more difficult when you go on a concrete bridge deck or a concrete road, because the concrete is white by nature. So in that case, contrast tape or contrast marking with a white or yellow in the middle and a black on the edge will give the cameras the ability to see that better. The third thing that cameras are looking for is the wet reflectivity. And by design, manufacturers like 3M have created products that are redundant in that they provide dry, they provide wet reflectivity, they provide retained reflectivity for a period of time, and they're good for the users of today, but the machines of tomorrow. So maybe I'll let Sinan talk a little bit more about kind of the pavement marking side of autonomous.
Sure. Maybe I'll just take a step back and clarify the description of the autonomous vehicle, because we have been hearing the term very broadly in the industry. However, there's sometimes a misuse of the terminology. So in a very simple set, if we can see these technologies as assisted driving technologies that we have today in most of the new vehicles, that they come in the package of lane keep assist or lane departure warning or traffic sign recognition. And those have been on the roads for a while, and they are out there, and they are currently utilizing the physical infrastructure as it is. And if you go to further in the upper end of the technology, then you have the full autonomy and connectivity. That's where the 5G becomes important. That's where the digital infrastructure becomes important. So it is really a combination of physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure working together for both assisted driving and then the full autonomy for these vehicles. So what we have seen is, and what the experts say is, all these lane keep assist and lane departure warning technologies, first, they are really expected to work, and they are showing some promise for reducing accidents, fatalities, which is great. I mean, when we look at this from an infrastructure perspective, we understand that providing the consistent, reliable lane guidance in all the conditions, as Mike alluded to, in day and night, wet and dry, is really a top priority, or should be a top priority for traffic engineers and technology officers in the agencies. And as we look forward to further driver assistance systems and fully connected and autonomous vehicles, then these highly detectable, highly consistent and reliable pavement markings still remain important feature. And with the connectivity, then the future proofing of the roadways becomes important. And we are seeing some examples of it across the nation in different parts of the nation, where actually different consortiums are coming together to really resolve this, both from a physical infrastructure perspective, from connectivity perspective, and also from the OEMs. So that's the pavement marking side, and that's really important for these technologies to see the roads and to really be for the systems to behave correctly. And there's a signing piece of it, and the signing piece of it is really interesting. It's really open for some innovation and for some new technologies over there. And there are different things that are being explored in states like Michigan and California to really help with the guidance or the localization of these vehicles. And these are more the processes of, let's say, incubating some new ideas within the industry and looking into how these technologies can solve some new problems that these vehicles may have. With that, I think a couple of things that we have done in terms of educating and creating some awarenesses. We have some white papers that explain how these technologies work, how the pavement markings could be the best identified by these technologies, as well as really how these solutions work effectively, and how maybe a camera system works, how a camera system sees the pavement markings. And we do have some of these tools that will help the agencies to understand the technologies, as well as maybe to help them make some better decisions as they future-proof their roadways.
Well, that's really interesting. From my background being asset management, it sounds like the pavement the pavement management side of thing is going to have to evolve into striping and signing in even more detail than it has in the past, because for these vehicles to be able to travel the roads, if they, Mike, what you were saying, and Sinan, what you were saying, if these vehicles can't see those striping, they can't function correctly or safely. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely. I think it comes down to how do agencies start proactively looking at all their markings, right? And how do they manage the minimum levels of retroreflectivity that have been proposed, whether or not this new MUTCD addresses that level of reflectivity from a pavement marking standpoint, which it kind of kicks the bucket down the road again and
Right.
says, the numbers that they're proposing, the millicandela levels, we don't know if they're going to be, if an agency can meet those minimums if they're in a snowplow state. But I think agencies like Pennsylvania Turnpike, agencies like big agencies that have the manpower to look at and say, all right, how do I manage my inventory of markings, and how do we create a tiered solution? And even some of the big cities like Portland, Maine are doing tiered markings, not just one type of marking that meet the needs of all their different roads, from super high ADT to low backcountry roads,
Yeah.
So I have to ask, because here, at least in New England, we're getting some snow right now, and without getting into a long discussion, how is snow handled? I mean, obviously the pavement markings are not visible underneath it, and signage obviously is, but what's I guess the Reader's Digest version of that?
Nan, you want to take that one?
Sure, I will take that one. I'll take the hard ones.
Looking out my window, Bobby, thinking the same thing.
No, that's an excellent question. So again, I think one way to look at this technology is it is really about the whole system. There's the vehicle itself, there's the physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. So one thing is to understand that they all need to work together, right? But specifically when it comes to the pavement markings for the snow conditions, it's interesting. If you go back maybe a decade or 2 decades ago, we have installed some technologies related to like magnetic detectable pavement markings that are, even though they're under snow, some of the snowplow states like Northern California and or up in the mountain regions, and also in Minnesota, we have some installed to help navigate, help those vehicles navigate. So I would say it's still a challenge, and there are still different technologies being considered how to best mitigate for that. And as the vehicle technologies evolve, as the physical and digital infrastructure start to work hand in hand, we'll see different solutions how to resolve the issue. But currently, it is still a challenge for, at least for the assisted driving and other existing technologies out there for the passenger vehicles.
Mike, you talked a little bit about you had a Baystate Roads training coming up. What organizations are out there for folks to kind of learn more about striping and the MUTCD requirements in general?
Sure. Yeah. Baystate Roads, obviously, you know, all the local roads. I just did training for the guys up in Vermont, Vermont local roads, New Hampshire local roads, Maine local roads, Rhode Island local roads, Baystate Roads. And then we have other organizations in New England called, one specifically that comes to mind is ATSA, American Traffic Safety and Services Association. And ATSA is really about, we have a New England chapter that I'm a part of, and I'm on the board. And I think we try to focus on pavement markings, which I'm the technical chair for, signing, and temporary traffic control and guardrail. So those 4 components, those are where we that's our sweet spot. We like to do a lot of educating around those different products and those different, low cost safety improvements. And then ATSA does a lot of education through flagger training, through work zone training. And ATSA has a national show that's going on right now that Sinan's a part of that he can talk about a little bit.
Yeah, maybe just to give a couple of highlights. First of all, this is one of the, I think, the first time that the ATSA will be a virtual event, and it's going to be it's going to be interesting to get all these on-demand learning possibilities for the ATSA attendees. So we do have a couple actually activities around education, specifically when it comes to our industry. We are looking into, to your point, Conrad, some new technologies around roadway safety asset management, and what are some of the contents to know, how our customers are looking into to manage their assets. And there are some new trainings from our end about reflectivity of pavement markings, what is important, what is the difference between wet recovery, wet continuous standards, and of course, ASTM type 11 sheeting, the safety benefits of those technologies. And new to this year, we're also looking into some educational events or on-demand courses on urban safety and mobility, impact detection system for the highways, and also maybe social distancing and future wayfinding, primarily with these the quick build projects that we are seeing across the nation due to COVID. So in addition to these, there are 2 panel discussions that will be around digital printing, both for highways as well as customized printing technologies, and also data-driven intersection improvements for the urban environments. What could be done maybe proactively in the urban settings to look into the areas and determine what might be some safety challenges, how to mitigate those, both from an engineering and materials perspective. So again, I think we look forward to this engagement, and we're always open to either be online in this virtual event, or anyone to reach out to us if they have any questions or further interest in these courses and events that we're holding. But we definitely look forward to this very engaging and connected event this year.
Great. Last thing I just wanted to get into, obviously we're still in the middle of this pandemic, and I'm sure 3M has gone full bore into PPE and providing that to the folks that need it. Why don't you just talk just briefly about what 3M has done in their efforts to help out?
Sure. Yeah. As you know, we've gone full bore into production of respirators. So we manufactured 2 billion respirators globally in 2020, tripling production since 2019. Now we're making more than 95 million respirators per month in the US alone. That's more than quadrupling domestic production since 2019. We're also partnering with other companies like Ford in creating PAPRs for first responders and healthcare workers. And we're accelerating all of our products to make sure we meet the needs of people. And it's hard to meet the needs because there's such a huge need. But at the end of the day, you know, we are doing our best to keep up.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate the efforts. You know, we're out of time here. We appreciate you guys coming on. You know, a lot of great information for the local agencies in looking at their signage and striping moving forward and some of the upcoming technologies. So with that being said, I want to wrap up this episode of New England Road Talk, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great, guys.